Good evening and welcome to the Portsmouth School Board, Tuesday, July 10th, 2007, here at the Eileen Dondero Foley Council Chambers of the Portsmouth City Hall. I'm going to ask the superintendent to call the roll.
Regarding attendance for this evening, please. Nancy Noveline Clayburgh.
Here.
Sherry M. Garrity.
Here.
Clay Haywood.
Here.
John Lyons.
Here.
Brendan Restano.
Here.
Mitch Childman.
Here.
Carson Smith.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Linda Brolette.
Here.
Ann Mayer.
Here.
Abigail Rockefeller.
Here.
Kent LePage.
Here. In a moment, I'm going to ask us to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and ask Councilman Whitehouse to lead us tonight in the pledge. But as we rise and have the for a moment of silent reflection, as we do all the time, first of all our children from the schools are out on vacation. Please keep them in mind. And we do have sad news this past week. A gentleman who gave his heart and soul and worked on the Portsmouth New School as the on-site construction manager, William D. Bartolomeo, we knew him as Billy D., passed away on this past week. Those that knew Billy, he was a great individual. He had a lot of experience in this. Probably could help us out in the near future. He did have a history, as Bob and I had talked today, of diabetes, and this was quite unexpected. I will ask that the board, we will get a card and condolences off to his immediate family. He was a great individual, one of the most mild, meek individuals, but could get a job done without raising his voice ever. So our hearts go out to his family, and please keep him in your minds, and keep those that are serving us across the world and our armed forces in your thoughts. Have you rise for the pledge.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I will have the obituary here, and we'll get it back and ask Patty so that we can get a letter. Bob has one other note to make for the table tonight.
I'd just like to mention to the board that if anyone doesn't know, Helen Maldini, who was the chair of the Newington School Board, she's sitting with us this evening, and I just want to make sure that we recognized her.
Welcome, Helen. Welcome. Thank you.
And then we have correspondence tonight. You have two. You have a thank you note from Marcia Shaw. And two, we have the letter from Heather Hurt from regarding the Portsmouth Middle School. Is there a motion to accept and place on file?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to place both on file. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Item 2, agenda approval. Are there items the board wants to allocate for tonight's meeting? I will bring up the item of item 4C. The letter that was voted on by this board and now in draft and ready to go, pending board approval to the city council under item 4C. Is there anything else? Nancy.
I would like to make a report for the athletic committee under committee reports. That will take 10 minutes max.
Any other items under agenda items? Seeing none, that moves us to item, I'm sorry, Bob?
Can you go back to this?
Oh, approval, I went right over it. Item 1D, approval of the June 26, 2007 minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, any corrections, omissions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. That now brings us to item 3, public commentary. Everyone is allowed 3 minutes this evening, and you got the timer right? Yes, you do. First speaker, and I apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name, Rebecca Emerson, regarding Portsmouth Middle School.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Emerson, and I live at 34 Woodbury Ave. I speak to you tonight as a mother, and I was asked to say hello to my son, and a graduate of the Portsmouth school system. It was with great interest that I watched you decide upon the letter that you will be presenting to the City Council. Thank you for listening to the voice of Portsmouth citizens. For clarification, I would like to ask if the statement, "We are prepared to support Parrott Ave," means that you are in fact supporting Parrott Avenue. If that doesn't mean that you are preparing to support it, that you will support it, I urge you to remove the stipulations from your letter and support Parrott Ave unequivocally. Parrott Ave has been identified as a viable choice for a middle school, so let's go ahead and start planning. And let's not be constrained by the so-called educational narrative. That document seems to be nothing more than a shopping list created by Team Design, a firm that has no ability to renovate an historic building, but instead mass produces big box store buildings that leak 3 years after completion. A true educational narrative, in my opinion, would discuss foreign language, fine and visual arts, music, like the strings program that you were not able to fund, visual arts, theater, math, science. And as John Lyons said it best, a good teacher can teach anywhere, even on the moon. And Mr. LePage himself said, it's the people who teach the children, not the building. So please, I urge you, our elected school board, to think outside of your own personal boxes and do what is right for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Richard Adams regarding Portsmouth Middle School.
Good evening. I'm Richard Adams, 75 Kent Street, Portsmouth. I attended your last work session, and I first should say that I'm a strong supporter of a renovation of the Parrott Avenue School. I thought you got off to a very auspicious start, at least from my point of view, when John Lyons said the public has spoken and we should respect their wishes. And by the way, I do believe that the study circles represented a broad spectrum of the Portsmouth electorate. However, by the end of the meeting, it seemed to me that we'd gone full cycle, and you were really prepared to put forth a very lukewarm endorsement of the Parrott Avenue renovation by attaching crippling stipulations to it. Unless there's something I misunderstand, I don't know why you need another feasibility study. That's been done. Our study circle, many others, I think, address many of the issues that you seem to feel are stumbling blocks, such as eminent domain, which has been very adequately addressed and shouldn't be a problem. So I would urge you to proceed as Heather Hurt has suggested, dispense with this letter requesting yet another feasibility study, show that you truly are prepared to endorse the sentiments of the electorate, and find a way to renovate the Parrott Avenue School. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have David Foreman, I believe it is.
I'm David Foreman, 579 Sagamore Avenue in Portsmouth. There are many technical issues that have been discussed relative to the middle school, and I'm only going to limit my conversation tonight to one item, which I'm sure everybody will be happy about, and it's the eminent domain. And I want to further limit myself to a letter to the editor that was written on June 28th, and I believe published a couple days later. And with your permission, I'd like to bring this up so you could just pass this around to the school committee.
Certainly.
Sure.
Thank you. Next, we have Heather Hunt, Portsmouth Middle School. I'm sorry, is it Heather Hurt? I'm sorry.
Heather Hurt, 69 Newcastle Avenue. I just want to say thank you all for being here and working on this. This is a tough issue. I just am here to urge all of you on the school board to recommend next week to City Council that we move forward and renovate the Parrott Avenue Middle School. And that is a immediate next step that we request funding to hold a competitive design contest. And I've outlined how that might work as, some ideas in my letter. Why this makes sense, one of the biggest feedbacks from the listening session was that we have multiple design options that are presented to the community. Multiple designs are going to maximize the best. They're going to ensure that we have the most optimal design. That's going to ensure that the design is more cost conscious for all of us taxpayers out here. It's also going to restore, I think, the community's confidence in the school board process. And frankly, another feasibility study makes really not a lot of sense at this point. It's already been done by team design, and we know a renovation is possible. So in conclusion, I think really the win-win solution here is for the school board, city council, and the whole community is to move forward with Parrott Avenue and hold this design contest. I mean, the whole community can really get excited about what that might bring to Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eric Spear.
Good evening. I'm Eric Spear at 49 Mount Vernon Street. I've been following the middle school issue very closely for 3 years, gone to far too many meetings, and we started out with pretty much a consensus that we couldn't renovate the Parrott Avenue School and keep all 3 grades in that building. And then over time, we had a second committee, and we came to a different conclusion that really at either site, Jones Avenue or Parrott Avenue, we could have a middle school. That would be great. And then we had a little bit more studies with the study circles, whose job it was to study this thing and really look into it deeply, spend a lot of time on it. And they came out, kind of the ball is shifted now, and they really came to the conclusion, I think you'll agree, that Parrott Avenue was the better choice between the two. So now, one thing that's remained constant in the past few years, though, and everyone has agreed with, is that there is a need for a new middle school, whether it's here or there or wherever. And that isn't going to change, and it's only going to get worse. And so that's why I think it's important that you pick the Parrott Avenue site quickly without more studies and more experts and more deliberation. Pick the site quickly so we can get on with the process of renovating the middle school and rectifying all the problems that are in that building. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Chilman?
Hi, it's Carol Chelman, and I live at 430 Richards Avenue. I guess I'm going to echo some of the sentiments of another citizen that has spoken before you this evening. My question is very simple. Have you picked a site? There's all this wording of we are prepared. I guess just bottom line, have you picked a site? And if you haven't picked a site, you need to pick a site. As was pointed out a few minutes ago, and I'm sure you all know very well, that middle school that we have right now is a mess. And besides it interfering with the education that the children are receiving there, I think that I took a tour of the middle school, and I think that there's safety issues in that school. And I'm frankly amazed that there hasn't been a lawsuit by now. Setting aside lawsuits, I'm sure each one of you is deeply concerned about the children that go to this school, all the children in the schools. And you have their interests always at the foremost of whatever you're doing. And if that is the case, I'm putting myself in your shoes now. The best thing I could do for those kids would be to pick a site, obviously Parrott Avenue given the public opinion, and get going. You don't want to delay. You don't want to stall. Every day, every month, every year that you stall on this school decision is, another year of a children's life in that school that you've all agreed and stated publicly is inappropriate. It's absolutely imperative that you pick a site and that you proceed with that site as quickly as possible. And there's been another citizen, Ms. Hurt, has mentioned a design contest. there's many ways you can skin this cat. Bottom line, I trust all of you have the children's interests in mind. Figure out how you're going to skin that cat and do it as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last speaker we have tonight is Mary Lucas.
Hello, my name is Mary Lucas. I'm at 367 Richards Avenue. Thank you to having us, your electoral school board. I'm a parent with an elementary school child going into fourth grade. As a parent and taxpayer, I and many parents and neighbors, we want the visibility to see our children before, during, and after school. This will involve that has been going on for 75 years. I mean, they've been in town. This would involve my child and any modification that my child has with the renovation. It's going to affect me, not my child. So you need to be aware that whatever you choose, it's not going to be it's going to be the faculty and the parents that it's going to inhibit. The children aren't going to care where they are, what they're doing while you try and renovate Parrott Avenue. Please be creative as the ideas posed before you are embraced. I mean, just please think about the circle studies. People have brought different ideas, agendas before you. Don't discard them, just try and embrace them. This is not about my child, but the better of the community. I mean, this is 2 years of a window out of my child's life, but I'm looking not for my child, I'm looking for the better of the community. Leaving another building abandoned or vacated, needing a renovation at the taxpayer's cost is absolutely irreprehensible. I mean, just think about what's going forward. Please think again. Renovate a historic building that has been educating for 75 years. The fields, parking issues, and all that has been stipulated before you bringing this to the council can be rectified. It's not a big deal. Please, just, the fields have been used in this town for forever. If we need certain fields for certain sports, just make it work. Parking, make it work. You can put certain tickets items, little just things on the parking tickets of the windshields of certain people who are established at the middle school, and just the complete narrative. Thank you. The complete narrative. It's a wish list, and I would have a wish list for my own life, and I wish.
Thank you. Concludes the public commentary session. That brings us up to item 4, items for discussion. Item 4A, request from the Portsmouth High School Men's Ensemble to attend the Northeast District Young Men in Harmony Music Festival at Fitchburg State College. I believe we have Principal Collins with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I regret to say that Mr. Parrington is not able to be here this evening to present this, but he, as he likes to say, Jeff, trust me. So he sent me forward here to request your permission to allow 3 of our students to attend this great festival coming up on August 9th through the 11th. Because of Mr. Parrington's participation and association with the Yankee Clipper Chorus here in Portsmouth and the Barbershop Society of America, Portsmouth High School has been fortunate enough to send a number of students for the past 5 years to Fitchburg State to the Northeast District Young Men in Harmony Music Festival. As I mentioned, this year it's begins on August 9th. It's a 3-day participation where students will arrive at Fitchburg State, stay on the campus in dorms, also eat in the dining halls with people from around New England, students from around New England. They will rehearse on both Thursday and Friday, and they will perform 6 tunes at a concert on Saturday. It's a great opportunity for our students who will attend. It's free of charge for any of our men's ensemble singers. The Yankee Clipper Chorus has picked up the entrance fees and the accommodations for all of our students who are attending this festival. come August 9th and 11th.
Move to approve.
Second?
Moved in second, discussion. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Nope. Passes. Tell them to have a great time and represent us well.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy your ice cream.
Both of you. Professional nominations, DZ.
We have two nominations for you this evening. The first is that of Perrin Long for the culinary arts teacher at Portsmouth High School, replacing Diane Pinkham. Perrin is in the process of getting a master's in gastronomy from Boston University and is also a Portsmouth resident.
Move to approve.
Second?
Moved in second, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
The next is that of Gina Duchesne for a career technical counselor at our Portsmouth Alternative Secondary School. Gina has a master's in social work from the University of New Hampshire.
Move to approve.
Second?
Moved in second, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Under professional, one other thing that we must do at this time, as I state in our pre-meeting, just like the Sparrow's going to Capistrano, we need to give the superintendent the power to hire during the absence of no meetings until the 10th, I believe, of August. Is that correct? Whenever our next meeting is, so that he does not hold up or lose any candidates. Is there a motion to allow the superintendent to have such power?
So moved. Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. We may do the same thing in August if we don't have another meeting. That's it under professional nominations. That brings us to item 4C regarding last meeting's motion of the letter to move to City Council. Bob.
You want me to start that, or do you
Yeah, I'll
want
have
to?
you start.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I do have a copy of a letter that we have put together which reflects the motion that was made at the last meeting that I would like to ask for discussion purposes that we sign this letter so I can, and then you give me permission to send the letter to Mr. Blahenko and the City Council tomorrow morning, so that can be put in the board packet for Monday night's meeting, so the City Council can begin to discuss this for the purpose of moving this along. I'd like to have your permission to do that, so I can work with Mr. Blahenko and his staff to be able to develop a request for proposal, which would go out to architects, whoever is interested, to solicit multiple design options for the Parrott Avenue site, given the different options, and by that I mean to the left of the school, to the right of the school, because those are being discussed as we speak. But I'd also like to be able to send a request for proposal out to the architectural firms, ask for these design options, maybe back in 60 days, and certainly invite them to a mandatory meeting, as I said, at the middle school, so they can get a tour, which will help us move along and be able to work with the City Council so we can come up with a design for Parrott Avenue, so we can decide whether that site is, in fact, a site that we want to put a middle school on, so we can move ahead.
Sherry.
Could you just read the letter for those at home and
Sure.
listening? Thank you.
It's to the Honorable Steve Marchand, Mayor, City of Council members in Portsmouth Municipal Complex. Dear Mayor Marchand and Portsmouth City Councilors, the Portsmouth School Board, at its meeting of June 26, 2007, approved a motion to inform the City Council that it is prepared to support the Parrott Avenue site if the City Council will provide the necessary funds to have an architectural feasibility study to determine whether the Parrott Avenue site supports grades 6, 7, and 8, meets the educational narrative, provides for sufficient athletic fields, and addresses parking, parent drop-off, and bus safety. We look forward to working together to benefit our middle school students and the community. And it's signed by the Portsmouth School Board members and Helen Maldini, chair of the Newington School Board, if you so wish.
John?
Mr. Chair, is it your position that we need a vote on this letter? We voted unanimously. Dr. Schuldman was not here to participate in that. But we voted unanimously, and if that letter, in fact, matches what our motion is, then, and no one objected and said that it was contrary to what our motion was, then by that vote, would not the superintendent have the right to send this letter?
That's correct. He's just asking for our support to make sure our signatures are on it. That, we actually voted within that motion that we would all sign it pending notification to Dr. Cushing and Helen Maldini, so that they were aware of it. And also, I believe you actually asked to make sure Mitch was informed on all of it. So it does cover all the bases. In fact, we cannot vote on this because it would not be under parliamentary procedure. We can only either sign it tonight or not, and that is, you know, an individual wish. So at this time, what I'll ask is that we will start with the letter to be signed, and is there any further discussion on the letter at this time? Okay. Nancy?
Would it be appropriate at this time to ask Attorney Sullivan, since he was so kind to come to our meeting tonight, to explain how the RFP works and then how the school board approves the plan, the council approves the bond, then the JBC, the Joint Building Committee, is established? If we could just give him
I had asked Bob to be here tonight in case there's any
clarifications that need to be explained to the public.
Can I ask him?
Sure.
My kind invitation to this meeting arrived late this afternoon, so I'm not overly prepared. However, I have some background on these things, and I'm willing to share it with you. The process to moving forward is basically this. With respect to selection of the site and with respect to design of the new middle school, those are decisions which are made by this board. The City Council's role is to provide money. The way that letter is written, the City Council will be requested to provide money for this feasibility study. Ultimately, once you have selected a site and you have determined a design for the school, the City Council needs to be asked to provide the money to build the school, which they do by passing a borrowing or bonding resolution. Thereafter, this is all by state law. A joint building committee would be established in accordance with the provisions of the statutes, 50% of the members being appointed by the City Council, 50% by you. And the responsibility of the Joint Building Committee will be to take the money provided by the City Council and to build the school which you have selected the design to be built. In terms of the RFP process for actually building the school, there really is tremendous flexibility. There are a number of different design and construction methodologies from which you might select. In former times, what was always done was the so-called traditional design bid process, in which you would have the school designed, and then you would put the design out for construction bids and pick a contractor. High school was done by a process much more recently in vogue, construction management, in which you basically bring the contractor on ahead of time, and the contractor becomes sort of your employee to build the school. There is also another methodology, which I do not think appropriate for a situation like this, called design build, in which you hire one entity to both provide you with a design and to build that design. These are all decisions which you will make at a later point in time. The way I understand the letter which you've authorized to be sent, you have not made, to answer the question that was asked, I do not interpret that letter as selecting the site. I interpret that letter as turning towards the site and turning away from other sites, but not making the final step, is my interpretation. Have I answered your question?
I have a question. Oh, Nancy, and then Mitch.
it's the school board's responsibility to have a design to give to the city council and ask the city council to bond that specific design. Is that correct?
It can be done differently. If you can ask for money and use that money to do the design. But ultimately, the design and the selection of the design is your responsibility.
So when we put out this RFP to various architects to come back with a plan in 45 or 60 days, whatever it is, then the school board will look at all those plans and choose the one that they think fits the educational narrative, provides for the athletic fields, provides for the parking, and that's the design that we go to the city council with and say, will you bond this design?
That is a very
Correct.
that's a very logical scenario. It is certainly not the only one possible. The competition plan, there is certainly a way that could be done as well. But it's your decision.
I have Mitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nancy, just to address, I think what you're saying is, I'm glad to hear Attorney Sullivan say that's one possible way, because, to be honest, I wasn't here for the discussion last week, but I am a little bit confused, because the letter suggests that we're going to do a feasibility study. So that's what the text of the letter says. And I understand why we would do a feasibility study, because this is my interpretation of it. It's because out of the study circles came, at least to my ear, a different suggestion than one we had been considering before, which was not the issue of eminent domain necessarily, but now the opportunity was to build on the right-hand side of the building where the senior citizen home was and the garage, and closing Rogers Street as a possibility. With that scenario, that requires a feasibility study, in my view. That's what I understood that this letter is about. It's a feasibility study, because we know that Parrott Avenue, as defined by the previous JSAC committee, is feasible. But now we're opening it up broader to more. So I'm a little confused, because the superintendent said that we're going to send out an RFP to architectural firms for multiple design options. Well, that's not a feasibility study. That's setting, I mean, I wonder if we're getting ahead of ourselves with this. So maybe you can clarify all this for me, but I'm a little confused.
Again, there are a number of options. You can proceed in sort of one giant step, asking for, more or less completed designs of what could be built. You can ask for more conceptual designs. You can really pick wherever in the process you want the parties responding to the RFP to go to. Now, it would be customary, and let's say the competition scenario about what you've heard. If you were going to ask companies to submit very completed designs in order and do a really lot of work in order to give you your options, it would actually be customary to provide some compensation to those companies in order to get that volume of work done. Just discussing the matter this evening briefly with the chairman, I presented one, I guess this is even another option. You could issue an RFP broadly requesting relatively skeletal conceptual ideas. And from those, however many you might get, you can pick a lesser number and then go to the lesser number of companies and ask for more detail. And at some point you might get to where you were willing to actually pay money to get to a further step. The way I understand, the way I think this letter would work if it's sent to the City Council for Monday night is that on approval of a letter by the City Council, the top administrators of your department and of the city generally, Mr. Lister and Mr. Bohanko, would get together, would take the actions of the school board, the action of the City Council, and they would figure out as administrators how to advance the policy decisions which you have made, and frankly come back to you at some point with.
I'm good. Clay, and then Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, I'm going to ask you a question. With your years of experience, have you ever heard of where a school board has chosen a architectural team
and allowed the public to actually offer suggestions on how they would want to have, say, like the Portsmouth Middle School built, or how they would want it designed? I mean, since we're looking at all these different designs, and we've heard from the public that they have ideas as well, has that ever been done?
The only major school building built was, of course, the high school, and rebuilding the high school. And there were public hearings held. There were designs shown. Public input was solicited in terms of comment, but not decision making.
Thank you.
Sherry?
Bob, when it comes to the discussions on the or is it during the RFP or within the RFP, or is it just our superintendent talking to the city manager? When discussions are so that you know whether or not you can close down Rogers Street, or you know whether or not we can close down Parrott Ave, or where is the discussion process on what the city would or wouldn't allow, or isn't okay? Is that within the RFP, or is that just a process of talking and working things out between our superintendent and our city manager? How is that decided?
Well, in common with Board Member Schulman, I was not here at the last meeting either. But the way I interpret the letter, which I've just heard and read earlier this evening, the discussions, those questions that you propose, those have to be answered.
Right.
And I actually understand that the purpose of this letter is to get those questions answered by someone, obviously not by city officials, but city officials will determine who will answer them.
Okay.
Based upon money being provided by the city council pursuant to your request.
Brendan? And then back to Mitch.
This is actually a question for you, Mr. Chairman. If we, instead of sending a letter per se, and this is just hypothetical in any situation, if we just voted on a site, are we then bound by that site? So if we said, instead of sending a letter, okay, we want to vote on the Parrott Avenue site, are we then bound by that site no matter how much it costs, or if we found out, okay, you can't go to the right, you have to go to the left, and then there's not votes to go to the left, you're stuck in the current footprint, are we just, is that how it would?
You never really, because we did have this situation with the high school. You're not bound, because the original plan with the high school was to do a renovation. And as the architects, after many firms had worked with this, architectural firms, discovered that the underpinnings, at that time, it was BOCA, I forget what they are called now, it did not meet BOCA codes, so you could not keep a third floor on there. In fact, it was out of regulation. So we were already bonded for the amount of money. I remember this was a scramble for 3 months, an outstanding job done by all parties, and they were saying, yep, we can fit this new addition. I remember the first time over by the athletic building in the hill, and I'm sitting there saying, you got a lot of cliff, you got a lot of stuff. So to answer you, no, you're not bound on that. But there are a number of items that still, eminent domain does not end by just going to the right, because there is private property there. There is the Compass building. So, I mean, there are all those questions that Sherry just answered, that city attorney, along with city manager John Bohenko, along with other departments, are going to have to make those determinations. So whether you voted on a site or didn't vote on a site tonight, those questions have to be answered long before any shovel of dirt is taken. So you're nowhere different really right now than if you go ahead, because until you know you can turn the shovel of dirt, God forbid you're on an Indian burial ground or something, you're not bound. There are always things that you have got to keep in mind that can happen that will alter and change it.
Thank you.
Mitch.
Okay. I guess my question is this: if we send, for Attorney Sullivan, if we send this letter up, because what you're saying is the way you read the letter is it's sort of a half step. It's not a full step.
Exactly.
Right. But we will still get the answers to the questions we need from this letter, do you think?
Right. Ideally, that letter is a step in a progression which will lead you to having the answers to the questions you need about Can we go to the left? Can
Right.
we go to the right? Can we take that? How much will this cost? Et cetera.
So even if we, because I understand the semantics here between prepared to support and support. And when I first read this, that's what struck me. But beyond semantics, if the school board said, we want Parrott Ave, we support Parrott Ave, and the only thing was different was that as opposed to prepared to support, but we still want those conditions. I mean, people may not like them, but from our perspective, grades 6, 7, 8, the educational narrative, the athletic fields, which has to be answered in the waiver to the state, we have to come up with some kind of a solution. It's not like you can just set it aside and say, okay, we'll deal with this later. And the parking. So whether we say we're prepared to support or we support, is it
It may not make that much difference because that letter doesn't really identify a site. It identifies a component of the site, the present middle school.
Right.
But it doesn't say where else you would want this built. And the site for a new middle school, I think by everybody's estimation, is going to have to contain more than the site of the present middle school. And the remainder of the site has not been identified.
So the prepared is more than semantics.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Helen?
Okay. I was just wondering, in the letter, you asked for an architectural feasibility study. Why didn't you just go after the RFP? I mean, from our town, it's a little different, but why not jump to that? Because what you're going to look at is a site and a design of the school. So you'd be after the same thing.
Bob?
I did not write the letter. I was
Well,
not-
no, I mean,
John, I mean, you were the maker of the
I'm not
motion.
sure I understand exactly what the question is.
well, instead of, I mean, a lot of people are stuck on the architectural feasibility study, which we've done, and the educational narrative. But why not just start and go for the RFP from the city council?
Well, you are going for an RFP. I want to make that clear. You are going for an RFP. The difference is now we know we've expanded the footprint. Which way the footprint may go, well, we don't know which way it will go. But to meet those 3 criteria that are in that letter.
4. Right.
4. I'm sorry, 4. 4 criteria in the letter.
Okay.
You want to make sure you've covered everything. And again, I think, it's been discussed, could they go in front? Could they go, could they go fill in the South Mill Pond? Whatever the oddities may be, how can you do that best? By doing, an architectural design, I think it was the reason the maker of the motion, John, you can correct me, if we wanted it a little bit broader to make sure we weren't leaving out any options that might be able to be done on Parrott Ave. John?
The difficulty, Mr. Chair, is that when you gave the example to Member Restano's question, and we ran into the problem at the high school with maintaining that portion of the building, we were able to still stay on the same site.
Yeah.
The problem that we have is a practical one. And the practical problem is, as the city attorney indicated, is that the site itself, that building, as it's presently constituted, this board does not feel is sufficient.
Correct.
We need to expand in some direction. And quite frankly, I thank the study circles because I never thought about going to the right.
Yeah.
They brought, the citizens of this community brought that to us. And we've said, great idea. Let's see if we can do it. That's all this letter says.
I think that's the
It's
best.
that
Yep.
simple. Let's see if we can do it. Somebody even talked about, well, I won't go there. I've heard other interesting options as well. Well, architects and feasibility studies are open to look at all of those options. They may come up with something none of us or no citizen has come up with. But for this board to unanimously say that we are prepared to support that site and to ask that money be spent, our money to be spent to see if we can make it work, to interpret that is almost like saying that it was a done deal that we were going to support the site behind the high school, because obviously that hasn't happened. There is no preconceived. All we want to do is to look to see whether these wonderful ideas that were brought to us work, because we don't have control of that entire area. That's all.
Yep, I think that's pretty well.
Very well said.
And then, I mean, what keeps going in my mind is to ask the city council for bonding, we have to have a design. So we can get a design out of this that then we can go to the city council with and say, can you bond this project? Because the architects will also give us prices, correct?
Correct.
They don't just give you the design, they give you how much it's going to cost. So we'll be able to have the design, and then we can go to the city council, hopefully in 60 days, and say, here's the design we agreed on, here's the price that it's going to cost, can you bond that? So am I thinking correctly?
That's a very, that's a very logical.
That's correct, Nancy. Along though, the only thing I want to make sure is clarified that, again, because somewhere down the road, somebody might cry foul. They could give you the cost of the current building, addition on it, parking that may be done in fields. But, Bob, it would not be it would be up to the city to tell us the cost of taking by eminent domain the Compass building and any other property. That would be the city side, is that correct?
Proposers will give you whatever you ask them to give you to a lot of questions, such as how much would it cost to take a property. The best that they can do is give you an estimate. There's
Okay.
a statutory process that will lead to a result in terms of how
There's
much
either
you would
3 or
have to
4
pay.
parcels right there on that Parrot Ave, not including the road itself, okay.
There are professionals who can give you a pretty good estimate of the value that you would have to pay to acquire a property.
And then back to Mitch.
In terms of Compass Care in that area, wouldn't that just be an outright sale of property that would not be eminent domain?
I'm sorry, in terms of?
The Compass Care building and the garage and such? Wouldn't that just be a matter of purchasing?
Well, if the seller was willing to sell it, it would just be a matter of negotiating a price.
It would not have to be eminent domain?
That would not have to be.
Private
Right.
residency within that, too.
Right. Thank you.
On that parcel, I should say. Mitch?
Thank you. I just have I want to follow up on what Nancy was saying, because I want to make sure I understand. So we're putting out this RFP for a feasibility study. I really appreciate Mr. Lyons' characterization of what it was, because that really is clear, because that's why we're asking for a feasibility study now. But we put RFP for an architect to come forward, and then a single firm is picked to do the feasibility study. So we're not talking about a competition in terms of this feasibility study.
Not this first small step.
So that's why I'm not sure I quite understand, Nancy, because we're not going to have multiple designs to look at from this architectural feasibility study. We're just going to have one, which is the RFP that we choose from the companies that submit. I mean, they're not going to submit plans to us to say, look, it's feasible. They're going to submit they're going to answer the RFP to do a feasibility study. So we're not going to have multiple designs, at least as far as I understand. So I'm a little, that's
I'll
weird.
go to Bob. Lister, not Bob, sorry.
I'd like to follow up on Attorney Lyons' summary, which to me brings closure to the whole discussion, because it's very well said. When I said multiple designs in an RFP, what I have in mind is, and this is of course not what I have in mind, but when we develop an RFP, working with the city manager, is to look at multiple designs that are conceptual, only conceptual, and looking at different options. They may be playing this out. Let's say that we had an RFP that we were able to design with the city manager to do a feasibility study, and we invited 20 firms to submit in 60 days a feasibility of whether or not that property is able to be built on, and they also give us some conceptual designs that we can look at. I mean, that's one of the options. I think what Attorney Sullivan is saying is there are several options here, and we need to remember that. But it was mainly, when I talked about multiple designs, they were conceptual only, because then you have to go to the next step. This is only one step toward several that we have to make.
Nancy?
So again, just to clarify, the people that will decide which avenue the letter follows is the superintendent and the city manager. Is that correct? I mean, we turn this letter over to the city council, and then the city officials including a superintendent, will decide exactly how that will fall.
That's what I
That what
understand
you
that letter
recommend?
to request, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, John.
I move, I don't know if we have a question.
No, we
that
have
need
nothing to be
move.
moved. It's
just
Has the letter been signed by everyone?
Everybody.
Well, if everybody has signed the letter, I say we move on to another subject.
Okay, and that was absent that Mitch was here, and I know that Mitch, I guess you have signed the letter.
I did.
That it was a unanimous vote, so again, that we're in consensus of direction, and I think that's a big thing.
So for the public and the folks here, all school board members have now signed, including our member from SAU 50, I'm sorry, I should say, from Newington has signed the letter.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And we thank Helen and her students. That brings us to item 5, committee reports, curriculum council, summer professional development. Is that you, Steve Z?
Yes, I'm going to defer my time to Nancy and the athletic committee, considering the report I had given you at the last meeting regarding all of the professional development work that's going on this summer with teachers. I'd only highlight that this week we have a good number of teachers in the elementary and middle schools working on the science curriculum and integrating technology with that. That's going on this week, among many other things this summer. But considering that other report, I'll just pass it on over to Nancy.
Thank you. We had an athletic committee meeting on June 27th. It was Brendan Restano, myself, Russ Wilson, our athletic director, and our principal, Jeff Collins. Unfortunately, Carson couldn't be with us that night. But Russ took some time to summarize the successful athletic seasons this year at the high school, and he is just ecstatic with the way the year went. There were multiple victories with multiple teams, and he was very pleased, truly enjoyed his position as the athletic director of Portsmouth High School, felt that he got tremendous cooperation from, administrators, teachers, parents, kids. So he was just on top of the world right now. So I think we're really fortunate to have him, and thank you, Russ, for doing such a wonderful job.
And his team.
And his team, right? That's right, his team, Cause, and all the rest of the guys. Shirley, who retired.
Actually, not till the 23rd of August.
There were some almost 700 kids that participated in sports this year at Portsmouth High, so that appears to be a record high as far as they can tell. Right now, they're resodding the football field, and they're reseeding the soccer and field hockey fields, and they're resurfacing the track. I believe that's finished now. But those fields are not being used at all this summer because he felt they really needed a rest period, and this work is being done on them so that hopefully when the actually the preseason starts August 13th, I think. So those fields will be used as of August 13th. So he's happy that those fields are being resurfaced. Obviously, we all know they're used a lot, and they're in dire need of repair. So he's hoping that this helps put those fields in good shape for the fall, sports coming up. We talked about the athletic contract, and we reviewed it, and talked about, he feels, and Jeff, our principal, agreed with him that it was very successful this year, that they were very consistent in the administration of the contract. They had an excellent rapport, have an excellent rapport with the police department, so that they can work together to determine, which students need to be disciplined. And he feels that it is just been a very good contract, and would like to have it continue with one minor change. And I Xeroxed a copy for everybody. If you look at number 2, second violation, what it says is that on the second violation, you're immediately removed from sports at the high school for the next 12 months. Russ would like us to change it so that it says up to 12 months, up to a full year or 12 months. He feels that the second violation, if it's not, a real serious violation, that the student shouldn't be punished so that they can't play for an entire year. So he asked that we give him some flexibility in determining what the consequence would be for a second violation. So he would like us to approve that so that when they print these up while they need them by August 13th, they could incorporate that change. So if you look under where it says second violation, it would say, with any sports team in any season up to a full year, 12 months from the date of my second violation.
Brendan, at this time.
I would like to make a motion that we reopen the discussion of the student athletic agreement.
That has to be on a 2/3 vote, so that will be.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded, thank you. Will have to be a roll call. This is to reopen because it's the same sitting board that approved this.
What is your wish? Sherry Ham-Garrity?
Yes.
Clay Hayward?
Yes.
John Lyons?
Yes.
Brendan Restano?
Yes.
Mitch Childman?
Okay.
Carson Smith?
Yes.
He has to be different.
Nancy Noveline Clayburgh?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Kent LePage?
Certainly.
Unanimous.
Brendan?
Well, I make the motion because I would like for us to accept the change in the athletic agreement where it would, under second violation, where it would say, I will no longer be allowed to participate with the team for the season and will be removed from associating in any way with any sports team in any season up to a full year. That's the change I would like to reflect. In talking to Russ and with our principal, Jeff Collins.
Remember him?
Yeah, he was just here, you know, it's my old age. Giving them some discretion over the penalty for a student, I think would be fair, as we have moved this athletic agreement to now having a panel which the students face, a judicial system where they face, giving them the authority to of some leeway for a penalty for the child, I believe is fair for our administration to have. So,
Sherry.
So I need clarification. So what is it you exactly want to change? Like, you want to just accept the change that Nancy said, or did you have another change also?
nope, that was the only change I'd like.
3 words, 3 small words, up to an A.
Up to A.
Yes. Our new student.
Yes. I was wondering if there was any plan to make a contract for students not involved in sports.
Oh, yes, that was going to be my last comment after we approve this.
All right, we'll wait.
Thank you, Abigail.
Ann.
I was just going to agree with this. I think we have all felt that a zero tolerance is really not a reasonable kind of thing, that we really want the kids to be behaving responsibly, but that every situation is not exactly the same. And so having the leeway to take a look at each situation and yet still deal with having each student know what his possibilities are. I totally agree with this. So it's a good change.
Me too.
Move the question.
It is policy of nature, so it'll be roll call.
Regarding the motion, please, Sherry Ham-Garrity?
Yes.
Clay Hayward?
Yes.
John Lyons?
Yes.
Brendan Restano?
Yes.
Mitch Childman?
Yes.
Carson Smith?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Nancy Noveline Clayburgh?
Yes.
Kent LePage?
Yes.
Unanimous.
And just the final word regarding making this athletic contract a student behavior contract so that all students sign it and receive consequences for behavior that is not acceptable if you're in the play, if you're on the student council, if you're, you know, whatever. So what we decided to do, I guess with the board's permission, I think, well, tell me if we need the board's permission, we would like to set up a committee similar to what we had with the athletic contract that involves parents from both SAU 50 and 52, teachers, administrators. We had the suggestion of an adolescent psychologist. I personally know Dr. George Nowak, and I happened to see him, and he said he would be happy to sit on a committee like that. We would obviously have students on the committee. That's how we did this contract, and Russ was in support of that. He said he would like to sit on the committee. Wendell Purrington might be a good person to have on the committee, where he's in charge of the drama and the music, and Jeff Collins, obviously. So we would like to sit down and put together a committee and study this and make it for all students, not just athletes. And we would do that in the fall, starting in the fall, as soon as school starts.
Well, I'll go after
John.
You want to go first?
No, I'll go after you.
This is a rhetorical question that you can bring back to the committee. You say all students. What if I don't participate in anything? I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's a good question that we
you need
will
to
have
bring
to
back,
discuss.
because then the only punishment would be removal from school, which would then be more.
Yeah.
Or if
We
they
will
park
talk
on the
about that.
school or drive, might be a consequence.
Well, but that's what the concern that I have is as to making it apply to all students. So, thank you, Nancy.
Let me go to Ann and then Mitch.
It's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, Nancy, do you have any idea the number of kids that were disciplined this past year with the athletic contract, or the number of times they had to
Did he say?
implement
I
this?
think he said 10 times, or not more than a dozen times.
More than 10.
Not more
So
than
considering
10.
the number of kids that we had on
Pretty
athletic
good.
teams, we did well.
Yeah.
Mitch and then Brendan, then Carson.
I know that this has come up in the past. I personally don't think I could really ever support a contract that all students sign on behavior. I don't see I don't want to be overlooking everybody's personal behavior, especially if they're not on teams or if they're in. But I guess my big concern is before a committee is formed to decide to look into writing a policy, does the board want to take a few minutes maybe at another meeting to talk about whether we as a board feel that we want to have a policy for all students to sign on their behavior 365 days a year? Because
Go to Brendan.
Well, now that you said that, I don't know if my statement's really relevant, but if a committee is formed, I would like to make sure that a member from SAU 50 is a part of this committee and that they have input in it after our discussion, whether we feel that we need to have the talk about a student contract. So,
Abigail, then Sherry.
Ms. Clayberg, have you figured a timeline for when this student in general the contract would be ready? Are you figuring this as soon as it's ready, like this year?
My guess is it wouldn't be used this year, it would be used next year, but that's just my guess. We would go with what we have with the athletic contract for 07, 08, and then this, if it's all approved, and it would go in for 08, 09.
How long did it take to make this year's athletic contract?
To make this one?
Mhm.
We actually did this we did it in 6 weeks? Yeah, I mean, it didn't take.
Do you think we could do the student body in 6 weeks?
Well, possibly, yeah. Why, do you think we should?
Yes. I think that you should either have it for everybody or for nobody. I don't think anybody's above the law.
I agree. Thank you. That's a
Let me
good
grab
suggestion.
Carson and then Sherry.
Like Mitch, I don't support contracts in general, and I was a part of the committee that drafted this student athlete agreement, and I was outnumbered, and so I acquiesced to the will of the majority. But like Mitch, I think we need to think about getting to a place where all our students they feel like they're part of a community, they have investment in the community, they have investment in their teams and their activities in their school and their academics, and I think philosophically we're headed in the wrong direction here. We're looking to create all these contracts, these ironclad agreements, so that no matter what eventuality comes up, we have some sort of recourse, and I appreciate the fact that Russ has put a little bit of a human element, if you will, in this by allowing himself some leeway. But I question whether philosophically the idea of creating a contract for everybody isn't contradictory to this ideal. And boy, I like Mitch. I think we might benefit from some discussion as to whether or not this is a direction we want to head in.
Sherry, then Clay.
Well, as was discussed, for what Mitch and Carson and Abby want, I mean, the policy committee, we have discussed that in trying to go in that direction. The policy committee has spoken about it at our last meeting, which is actually a couple of months ago, probably now. But even we are trying to deliberate on even just making the simple policy that's a paragraph that's in your agenda books and part of our policy books as being a behavior statement or something, you know, with the school. So it's not that we're not thinking that way also, it's just either which direction do we head in first, or which one's really going to win in the long run, or how much more thought do we want to give to trying to get this policy as a policy instead of a contract and something everybody has to sign. So I think maybe the policy committee should just take another stab at it and see what happens at our next policy meeting. And I'm sorry, and only while I have the mic for 1 second, can I backtrack to Curriculum Council? Do we have a meeting this month?
No.
Thank you.
That's it? That's all
That's
you
it.
have to backtrack for?
Okay.
Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brendan.
I agree with Mitch and also with Carson. I do like the idea of a contract, but I don't like the idea of it being 365 days. I don't believe that our students should be under a microscope for that period of time. Also, with what Mr. Lyon said, what about those students who don't play sports and those students that are not involved with band or with the plays and the theater? Are they going to be punished the same as the high honor student that's the quarterback on the football team? I just have a funny feeling about this, and I think we should reserve a time where we can all talk about this. Thank you.
Brendan. John.
I would like to switch positions with John.
Well, then get up and move.
Isn't the reason that we create subcommittees is to study, bring back to us information, and then we deliberate? So my understanding is that the policy committee itself hasn't decided whether we should have a contract for all students. The policy committee is going to look at whether or not we should have a contract for all students. I assume they'll look to see if there are other schools that have had it or have canceled it. We'll do that field work for us, then come back to us and say, look, this is what we've found out, then we have our discussion. Am I incorrect on that?
No, that's fine.
So if the
We can do that.
So-
Policy committee will take it up. We
Take
did
up
discuss
and
it. We have discussed it, but we'll discuss it again.
Well, I'm just going to butt in for a second. Though, I think there's a different view than what Nancy actually said her committee could do. Because you do want to involve SAU 50 rep. You do want to involve students, teacher, and administration. And again, I think as a board, we can create the committee. The committee could have the input and do some of that research to get to the policy committee or work hand in hand, because the policy committee does not have a student sitting on it. It doesn't have an SAU 50 rep on it unless asked. And again, I think it's missing those elements of what Abigail, I agree. And this is cyclatory, let me tell you. All you got to do is take a trip 13 miles down the road to Winnicott, and right now they're going back to what we had, which was in the presence of alcohol. So these things just continuously seem to evolve. So maybe, and again, I'll put it out there as chair as a suggestion, so that we can move on this and maybe have this comes up more than annually. In fact, to have this come up, we might need 2/3 vote, because I believe we took the vote on it, and we'd have to change it during this same administration. You'd have to go ahead and get a 2/3 vote to change it. Just
Change what?
well, to change the policy, because currently we have a policy that's just athletics. I think now if we're looking at it, contract, whether you either have it or don't have it, are two things. So let me just finish in stating that I would say, I do believe it might be time to have a committee, some way to put this to bed for a few years and come back with the policy committee with a full recommendation, whether it should be part of the school board policy, or whether they should be separate contracts for those for extracurricular activities. And I know we've batted this around a number of times. I believe.
Yeah,
Ann,
Carson
did I
has,
see your
did you
hand?
have your hand up?
No. Nancy?
You know, just in thinking of when we did the athletic contract, that's how we did it. We had a student rep, and it was Brittany Conway, and she went and asked the students what their opinion was. We had a couple of teachers on that committee. They went back and they did the teachers for us. We had parents, SAU 50 and 52. They went and talked to parents. So we got a lot, we got, Brendan helped us with that too, because we got athletic contracts from all different schools, and obviously he was familiar with the St. Thomas one because he had practiced that for 4 years. So we studied other athletic contracts from the general area. We did a lot of research before we wrote the contract. So that is, we could do that.
I'm going to make a motion, Mr. Chair, that the policy subcommittee be empowered to create a panel working together with the superintendent of this district, representative of SAU 50, and that they come back to the policy committee as a whole with findings, with a report back to us on the feasibility of a student policy.
And I'd like to put date certain on that by the second meeting of October.
Fine.
That way it's
My
not
motion.
hanging. There's a motion, a
Second.
Is there a second?
Can I
Yes.
just ask you a question? In the front of the agenda books, when my kids were in high school, isn't there a place where you still have to sign saying?
That's correct.
In general, I'll follow the rules? Is there still, does
That,
that still
and what
exist?
that does, I think the last time we've had some interpretation, as long as they're following school policy and
Right.
school rules. There's no, the contract covers more than just the school rules. That's outside of it.
Right, but basically, so then what it feels like you're doing is consequencing kids who decide to be athletes and play field hockey twice. And if you decide to be in the band, you can do that and just, break the band rules, maybe, as long as you're not an athlete. So it seems like we're giving them 50,000 things to sign, and I'd be confused myself. So maybe we just sign one thing and forget everything else. Right.
And I think that's what we're saying that this
It just is
committee
ridiculous.
can
So we
do.
shouldn't have
And
contracts.
along with John's motion, we'll make sure that the list.
All those issues need to be discussed.
And the right representation. I will work with the superintendent to make sure we cover all bases, because I think you want, I'm going to be honest, I think you do want 3 different coaches, a winter, spring, and summer type coach, just so you cover your bases. And again, maybe a couple of people at large, or parents or so forth, but not too big, because committees can be too big. Motion on the floor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll work on that ASAP so that, again, we can meet that October 2nd meeting in October deadline. Any other committee reports? Seeing none, that brings to item 6, financial 2007-2008 rates.
Okay. What we have coming, excuse me, in your direction, excuse me, is our yearly request to have a slight increase in some of the lunch prices. As you know, that inflation affects, food and labor and everything else, just like it does in the rest of the school business. So this is one way that we can try to keep a little bit ahead. To preface this by saying that although unaudited, at this point, it looks like the food service is going to be about break even. So what we'd like to do is go forward with the small increase in lunch prices to try to keep up with the part of the inflation that we can't do anything about. And the reason we do it at this time of year is so that Pat can get all her menus and and pricing and everything else printed up and out in the packets so that they go to the students out on time. So as you can see on this year, Pat has chosen just to increase lunch prices, elementary lunch, secondary lunch, elementary from $1.90 to $2, secondary from $2.35 to $2.50, and then the adult lunches from $3.25 to $3.50. She did show me the results of a study or survey that her organization, being the food service directors of New Hampshire, had put together, and we are certainly in line with other districts of our size throughout the state.
Move to accept?
Moved Moved and second, it is financial of purpose. Discussion. It will be a roll call.
Regarding the proposed school year lunch prices for 2007, 2008, what is your pleasure? Clay Haywood?
Yes.
John Lyons?
Yes.
Brendan Restano?
Yes.
Mitch Children?
Yes.
Carson Smith?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Nancy Noble Clayburgh?
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity?
Yes.
Kent LePage?
Yes.
Unanimous?
Thank you very much. Item number 2, as I've mentioned a couple of meetings ago, that we were putting out the RFP for the driver's education services at Portsmouth High School because that contract expires at the end of the summer session. We advertised it in the paper. We sent letters directly to vendors who had previously expressed an interest. And based on the responses we had 2 interviews for each of the vendors that responded. And we went through with an interview committee. And based on the results of that, I'm requesting that the school board give me permission to enter into a 2-year agreement with Pro Staff Driving School.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. It is contractual and policy of nature, so it'll be a roll call.
Regarding driver education, John Lyons?
Abstain.
Brendan Restano?
Yes.
Mitch Childman?
Yes.
Carson Smith?
Yes.
Ann Walker?
Yes.
Nancy Noble Clayburgh?
Yes.
Sherry Ham Garrity?
Yes.
Clay Haywood?
Yes.
Kent LePage?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have for this evening.
That's all you have. And the next agenda, just a reminder out there before we adjourn, Monday, July 23rd, there is no meeting. Some of you may have that down that we're going to try to do a joint meeting. There was discussion of that. There's not a meeting that night. We were unable to work things out. Plus, now with the current status of our recommendation to the city council, it's moving, so not needed at this. It is needed, but not at this time.
July 23rd now.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Carson,
All right.
we need to set a
So next
policy.
meeting, I'll give you-
I can go back on vacation.